Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2025. This is, I believe, our 17th Streaming Media Connect event, and this week it is all about live. Thanks for coming to our first session of the morning, which is titled Innovating with Ad Tech and Multiview in Live Sports, and it's brought to you by CommScope. So we'll get started in just a moment, but first, just a couple of housekeeping notes. The first person to name the music that we heard as we were coming in, both artist and track, will win a $50 gift card from Amazon at the end of the session. And we will announce it at the end of the session, and you must be present to win. So stick around for that. And of course, stick around for the great conversation that you're about to hear, which is we've got an amazing panel and should be a lot of fun. So as always, chat in the chat and put your questions in the Q&A. We will take questions at the end of the session. And if there's a lot of action in the chat, the questions tend to scroll away. So put them in the Q&A. Closed captioning is available. Just click the CC button to turn that on. And let's see, sessions from all 3 days of Stream Media Connect this week are already appearing on the Stream Media YouTube channel. And Bill's going to put a link in the chat to the playlist where those are going to live. And we will be back right here, February 24th to 26th, 2026 for the next Stream Media Connect. I don't believe the website is live yet for that, but the call for speakers is. So if you want to speak at the event or you have an idea for a session, we'd love to hear from you. And so just respond to the call for speakers, and I will see it as as soon as we finish this event, I'll start working on the next one. So I look forward to seeing what you all send into the call for speakers. So without further ado, let's get right into this session. I would like to welcome to the stage Brian Ring of Ring Digital LLC and hashtag Future of TV Live. Welcome, Brian. Good to see you.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen properly here. So, yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. This is a collaboration, a co-production, if you will, between Future of TV Live, a quarterly TV survey and Zoomcast, and a Top Tells review of the previous quarter that I run every quarter with some of my besties, Colin Dixon and David Bloom, often join. So I'm really excited to be co-sponsoring this. We've got an amazing lineup of panelists here, including Mike Chioditti, Senior VP of the PFL, going through some really interesting discussions as they have 1 year left on their ESPN contract. There you are, Mike. You can turn off just for a few more seconds. I apologize. I did say your name, but this was just the preview. But thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. I can't wait to have you on there. We've also got Ben Grad. He, a very unique background, just spent 8.5 years at Fubo and led a whole bunch of businesses, including then the most recent exit to Disney. So we're going to talk a lot about that. I just want you guys to know, get your questions ready for these guys, all the panelists. We're going to pause about 2/3 of the way in, and we'll get some Q&A going. It'll be a lot of fun. But we have a lot to talk about. I do want to thank CommScope Video Systems for sponsoring this panel, and we've put together a special ebook. It has brand new data on Multiview, how TV viewers perceive Multiview, and it's a great report. You're going to see data points like this that I do put out, 5 data points every quarter. It's a tracking survey. This one points to how much of a habit TV is. I've also got special data points on Multiview. Top line here, 23% are familiar and using it. There's some gaps here, 14% that are familiar but don't use it, and a lot of folks that just aren't familiar to it. You dive deeper into that data, you find some really interesting things. One, of course, live sports is the killer app, but news viewers also rank Multiview as more interesting, more strongly agree that it's a value add for the TV service. And then even more importantly, active users really love it. And so if pay TV is at a bottom, this is the setup for the entire show here today, right? I have been sort of speculating and writing that pay TV may have hit a bottom. First, it was Moffett Nathanson earlier in the year talking about 3 consecutive declines in the slowing in the decline. But even just 2 days ago, literally while I'm writing and preparing this, a new article, Dade Hayes from Deadline, covering a new note from Moffett Nathanson, Apparently, paid TV subscribers have risen for the first time since 2017. That is a fantastic context for this webinar, along with the acquisition bidding war that's taking place. And what it means to me is, if pay TV is at a true bottom, that things like Multiview and Mosaic guides will spark kind of a new TV arms race. And you'll see some data in this report that the coverage of things like Multiview is quite spotty. And then secondly, premium content advertising. We're going to talk about programmatic L bars in fast channels. We have Mark Lee of ALG and of course Mike Chioditti of PFL. But it is important to note, in fast, you don't have a lot of ad fill, and therefore it may or may not be the right choice. When you think about the very top content, like a football game, those types of content fill out all their ads. And in fact, too many ad breaks, too much ad load can really be a problem. So we'll dive a little bit into that. Here's a chart of the decisions I went through in trying to switch my service from YouTube TV to Sling. This was, again, as a result of the carriage battle, another signal to me that there's a bottom. Just in case you don't know what Multiview is, and when you read my story in the ebook about how I did end up with Sling, I actually don't have Multiview right now with Sling, and I'm a little bummed, but I do understand they're coming out with it next year, hopefully by March Madness time. We're also going to talk a little bit about betting and prediction markets. As those grow, the use case for Multiview will obviously grow as well. Okay, now I do want to bring on Jim Owens, Senior Director, Product Management. He of CommScope Video Systems. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Ryan, great to be here.
And just to give a high level, right, your advanced streaming video solutions, kind of two pieces as I've got here: advanced advertising insertion, what you call MDC, what others might call server-side ad insertion, but really the larger category is manifest manipulation. Viewers of this panel, I'm sure, are familiar with some of that. We're going to get into it. And then secondly, personalized multi-view. So just kind of a visual, the CommScope video stitching engine, sort of a compositing engine, I think. Correct? Used to be called like a virtual set-top box. So that's one piece with the personalized multi-view to drive premium viewer features. And then again, the flip side, manifest manipulation, where it's really about, as you say, Jim, personalizing the stream and being able to leverage the targeting of ad inventory. So let's just run through here first the compositing engine. Tell me if I get anything wrong here. I think you've got a lot of canvas on the left-hand side, HTML, media ads, etc. And then all the way over to the right side, kind of the features, if you will. And I just want to ask you, as between personalized multi-view, which seems like a really killer use case, a second one that you've kind of really highlighted, the idea that you can use mosaics, motion mosaics, to actually figure out like what you want to watch, which is a big problem. Finding something to watch is always something tough. Versus the final thing, L bars, the in-content advertising. I know it's tough to pick amongst your favorite feature sets, but what are you seeing in the market with respect to these kinds of things? And is there something here that I've missed that the video stitching engine can do that you're really excited about?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. You know, sports have become so important, particularly for live, that I think anything you can do to personalize that experience is going to be well received. Multiview is a good example of that. We're seeing a lot of interest in that. And obviously you need to monetize that content too, right? So anything you do on the advertising side is really critical. So I think you laid out well the two areas we see as important for personalizing the experience. And in this first one here, I like the word compositing. We use video stitching at sort of as a similar to ad stitching, except we're actually taking video content, media, could be ads, could be graphics, and we're stitching them together and bringing them together into a single video stream that you can then send to a subscriber. And the idea here is you can essentially build an application in the cloud, and that gets delivered to a user, and you can pretty much do anything you want. The advantage, one thing that maybe we didn't mention, was that this is a network-based approach as opposed to a client-based approach, which is a completely legitimate approach. There are trade-offs of each. I think the advantage of doing this in the network is that you can deliver to pretty much any client, any player. It's very easy to integrate, and actually you manage the bandwidth as well, right? So if you want to send 10 video tiles to a client, it comes across as one video tile, which is a huge advantage of doing it this way. And so that's what the VSE product does. You mentioned Multiview and some of the other applications. Yeah, Multiview is interesting because it's not a new application, right? It's been around for a long time. We've had customers on our platform doing that since the 2012 Olympics, where they had multiple videos and real-time updates on medal counts and things like that. So it's been around a long time. I think it's getting interest now because, like I said, sports is so important that anything you can do to improve that experience is good. The other one I mentioned, yes, this one here. So mosaics, really important. So that's interesting because if you think of a multi-view experience, it's essentially multiple tiles of video. That's a kind of a popular application. If you take that a step further, that multi-view can become your guide. And we have customers who have used this as their experience for users to look at content. There was a panel yesterday where they mentioned that discovery is one of the biggest challenges in sports, and I think that's true. If you can present to the user a view of all of the sports that are on right now with live video, and they can actually see what's happening, I think that really improves and it increases the engagement. In this example here, you can sort these tiles by genre, by any kind of category you want. We had one application where we just showed the most popular programs, and you could look at this screen and see what was popular on your service right now in real time and see what's live.
Yeah,
So
I think
powerful.
it's a super powerful idea. I put it here, it's something that I've researched for a while, is the idea of like how many people go in and they're looking for genre-based discovery. Like I go in, I want movies, or I go in, maybe I want a show, or I go in, I want sports. Turns out a lot of folks do the genre-based mode. And I think that's what makes this sort of interesting to me is I can go in, and even with movies, I bet there's some broader applications that I'd like to see for multi-view and mosaics, where from my perspective, was a cog psych major at Cal. I know how much brain power is on is spent in the visual processing unit. You can actually process 9, 12 motion thumbnails very quickly. It's sort of a channel surfing alternative. So I love that. Second piece of the portfolio, totally separate part of the stack. Super interesting to me. A lot of folks in this community and writ large know about manifest manipulation. The truth is a lot of companies can do this, but not a lot of companies can do it at the level of maturity and scale that you guys are doing it today. I read here 70% of the North American operator market is using server-side ad insertion technologies from CommScope. And I think that's in no small part because of all the other mature things around it. SCUDdy 224 processing, EAS alerts, emergency alert systems. Those are tricky. Also, the idea that you're going to optimize the media so that you have left drift. These are technical things that our audience is actually really familiar with, but you've done a lot of work. And then number three, I think very important on the ad creative, and Ray Holton, he's going to talk about this as well. If you find that you have an ad creative that's not at the right frame rate or encoding format, et cetera, I'm being a little loose with it, but you have a just-in-time transcode to make sure it matches and make sure that's super smooth. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the targeted advertising, the personalized fast channels, the bandwidth management. And I'm just going to make one little point here to tee it up for you too. Not sports necessarily, but weather. The Local Now is a client, and you do help them do all kinds of interesting personalized fast channels so that if I'm in Burlingame, which I am, I get the weather for Burlingame. Folks in the news always talk about the fact that you want the weather outside your window, not at the city over. So what I'll take it then one step further here, the idea that you can now also execute an L bar and make it locally targeted, right? So this is a little bit of a mix and match, but take this where you will. Speak to me a little bit about your manifest manipulation product, the MDC Manifest Delivery Controller, and which of these feature sets on the right-hand side are hottest for you right now?
Yeah. So just to clarify, our CommScope goes way back in more than 20 years experience in the advertising business, and we actually have about 75% of market share in the legacy kind of linear advertising, cable advertisers, but. That experience has really helped us, grow into the IP advertising sector. And today we do about 4 billion ads a month across customers representing about 30 million subscribers. So we have a very strong position in the SSAI space as well. But yeah, we see manifest manipulation as a control point for the entire user experience. So yes, that's advertising, but that's also really being able to manage anything that user sees. So as opposed to changing the video, which we talked about before, Now we're talking about just changing the segments that are delivered to the user. And that enables you to do a lot of really interesting things without actually having to transcode the video itself. So you mentioned a lot of them. So for sports, blackouts are really important. We can do that by directing different manifests to different people. You mentioned some of the applications. In addition, we can do everything from managing bandwidth. We can do, like you mentioned, a local targeted experience, which is essentially a personalized fast experience where we can give a custom list of assets, some weather, sports, news, targeted to an individual, leveraging both VOD assets that you have lying around, live content, and material we generate using our VSE product, which might be an animation showing the weather for the week. So it's very powerful when you can combine these two things together and target maybe an experience that you've developed by creating a specialized video, and then use SSAI to target that to specific users. So the two are really important. We think they're two sides of the puzzle, and you need really to have both of them in place.
It's interesting. So you talk about bandwidth management, your perspective inside a network equipment maker, thinking about the service provider, and it's a fantastic point. We're going to talk about it later with Mark Lee from LG Electronics, because there's a little bit of a trade-off. If you have 4 multi-view streams coming in off your pipes and your home Wi-Fi is not ready for it, could be an issue. On the flip side, what you guys are doing is on the server side, creating only one stream. So managing bandwidth becomes sort of an important discussion. We'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, I want to get back into the personalization and the specific format of an L bar. We really started out kind of diving into when with Steve Nathans Kelly and myself and Streaming Media, thinking about what was going to happen with these picture-in-picture type ads. I've talked about it quite a bit in the context of RSNs. It really does seem like the most valuable piece of real estate when you're not breaking away from a game. There's a pitching change. Nothing's happening on screen. I got to engage my viewers. Does seem very high value. And so the question is, where are you doing that? In a programmatic context or in a linear context on the CTV? And with that, just again, a thank you to CommScope. But I now do want to bring to the screen Mike Chioditti. He is the SVP of new business development at PFL. Mike, thank you so much. I'm sorry for throwing you for a loop there, but I really appreciate you joining here. And yeah, welcome.
No, thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me up here with this group of panelists. I'm at the Professional Fighters League. For those who haven't heard of it, it's the #2 MMA property behind UFC. MMA has been undoubtedly the growth sport of the decade, truly global. Our whole hypothesis behind this company is that this is a category that's big enough for at least 2 winners. So we've really been brought in to super serve that MMA fan and convert a lot of casual fans who don't know much about MMA into MMA. It's been a fun ride, and streaming content, media, leaning into lots of this innovation around the broadcast is very core to our strategy and what we're trying to build here at the PFL.
Awesome. So I once again messed up the share. Apologize for that. Let me go back in. Make sure I get the right thing here. So do appreciate you joining us. So just a bit of background. I know we'll talk more about it, but you're in your final year of a relationship with ESPN, a linear network in which you sell your content to, live content, but you also are an interesting company, and you'll go more into this. You actually have some of your own and operated assets in which you can execute things in content. And what I put up here is a list of official partners of the PFL, which is from the website. And I just want to tee it up in the following way, because I think you're right in the middle of a process that I want to mention something. TKO Group made some comments on CNBC, and they were really interesting. A few different points. Number one, that they talk about sponsorships as partnerships, and it was clear that they are really leaning into that to drive growth. And so driving growth in partnerships and sponsorships is a really interesting thing, because you have to balance what you're going to give them for in-content types of sponsorships with what you might be selling to a linear network. So 3 other points that came out of that. 1, the prediction and betting market, which is super hot. I want you to speak a little bit to what's going on there and how that might be an example where you're going to engage fans maybe in a dual screen or in content way. also the notion of slicing growth, right? Slicing it in too many ways. How do you manage the discussions with your various partners about who might get something in content, who might not? And then finally, the important point about it all has to benefit fans, a point that's sort of already wrapped up. But big picture then set up and question to you is how are you thinking about the landscape? How are you thinking about the fact that you have a media rights deal coming up where things in content might be wanted by that linear partner or media partner or might not be? Take it from there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot in there. I think if I were to summarize the state of the industry, I think all stakeholders from across the ecosystem have gotten smarter and more sophisticated. So just starting with sponsors, maybe 5, 10 years ago, I think it was just a lot frothier, a lot more money um going around. And sponsors may have been satisfied with a logo on a canvas. Whereas now what we're seeing is sponsors are really wanting to lean into content, really wanting to lean into using athletes as ambassadors to really drive call to actions where brand awareness isn't necessarily just enough. It's about really leveraging partnerships in a smarter way to actually drive adoption of their brand. And then if you look at the fan, their expectations have risen. They want to watch content in new ways. They want to subscribe to bundles that make sense to them at a price point that makes sense for them. And then the media partners, the rights are more expensive and they're being fragmented in more surgical ways. So we generally think fan first, and we think if we're optimizing for the fan and delivering a superior product, then the ecosystem I think has largely rallied around that as well. Of course, all the different sponsors, business partners, media properties have their own interest. As long as you're mindful of that and still coming at it from what's best for the fan, I do think there's this dynamic that a rising tide lifts all boats. So right now, I think if you look at the whole media ecosystem, the timely news this week with Netflix and with Paramount looking at Warner Discovery, right? I think there's this realization that hey, the industry is changing, AI is coming, the future will look different than today. And I think that's also applying to how media properties are looking at sports rights and how the rights holders are looking at media properties, where thinking about the fan first, thinking about ways to optimize that viewing experience. So as we enter this last year with ESPN, at a moment where they're losing UFC rights because of that Paramount deal, we're trying to make sure we're delivering the best product for ESPN, the best product for the fan, ideally over delivering for them and mapping toward their KPIs and making sure that we're canvassing the marketplace to gauge the level of interest in MMA, knowing it's one of the few sports that's truly global, truly growing. And I think a lot of industry tailwinds are behind us with UFC, with the value of sports rights, with owning IP and not just renting it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, feeling really good about the future of the business and the current state of the PFL.
Awesome. So I'll do one quick follow up on the L bars, and then I'll jump to you, Jim. But on the L bars, Mike, PFL, one of the first. Congratulations, in my view. You're really being bold on this. One of the first to traffic programmatic L bars, not just in ads. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but also in content. Maybe a little bit because of your unique partners, your unique owned and operated properties, as I understand. But you'll let me know. But how has that worked? What do you see the future? What do you see for the future of programmatically inserted L bars in that fast environment?
Yeah, so we've really leaned into fast. We have two different channels on most of the tier one, tier two platforms. Again, we want to maximize brand awareness and make sure fans can consume PFL content, and our archive does really well. And we also want to monetize it in a way that's not disruptive to the experience, ideally additive, and also make sure we're doing right by sponsors and brands who want to be associated with premium sports content. So we do both traditional, 15, 30-second ads, but also L bar, squeeze back, picture in picture. And we're seeing about 2 to 3x uplift in CPMs with the picture in picture. As you said, it's the best experience. It's not disruptive. I don't think the viewer minds it. They're still able to consume the content. And the advertiser gets the benefit of that direct, not fully integration, but side by side integration alongside premium sports content, which drives those higher CPMs and I think drives a higher connection with the fan and the brand they're associated.
That's awesome. Jim, I think you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, hey Mike, I was wondering, we talked to a lot of pay TV providers, content distributors, and they see the value in Multiview right away, right? It's a way to improve engagement. It gives their subscribers another way to watch content. Hopefully, it reduces churn. I was wondering, from your perspective as a content provider, how do you see Multiview? Do you see it as sort of taking away from an experience you might have one-on-one with a viewer, or does it open up new real estate for you to share the screen with, the NFL and the NBA and leagues like that?
It's the latter, especially for our sport, where we have moments where the fights are pretty quick, 5 minute rounds where you need to tune in, you're going to want to tune in. And then we have, some space between the fights. It is kind of that passive viewing experience with moments where you're going to want to be all in with audio, with making sure you're tuning into the PFL. So in a lot of our fights are alongside those other premium rights holders when they're live as well. So providing that optionality to fans to passively consume PFL during those breaks and then make sure they're focusing on the fight when the action is live, we think it's incredibly additive to the experience.
And then just a quick follow-up before we'll then introduce Ben Grad to the scene here. But I do want to just give you one opportunity. What do you see missing right now? What were the obstacles? I do know at least some of the CTV guys held back on executing. There are also issues with ad fill in general in the FAST marketplace. What do you see as the advice for the industry, if you will, to help us push forward on programmatically trafficked LBARs in that FAST environment in 26?
I'd love to see more standardization, right? There's still so many walled gardens where some of the tech specs are different by platform. Some of what's allowed in terms of different ad formats, some of the integrations around what tech providers are integrated with various distribution platforms. A lot of the metrics and reporting is still very manual and not apples to apples. So I would say, to the extent there could be more standardization across the industry, I think it makes it easier for all members of the ecosystem.
Awesome. Great answer. Okay, let's take a moment and introduce Ben Grad of Riverloft Advisors to the scene. Ben was most recently SVP, Strategic Partnerships and Operations at Fubo, where he launched and scaled new streaming businesses to profitability, including Fubo Canada, Fubo Sports Network, which I believe is the FAST channel, if I'm not wrong, and Fubo Free, Fubo's FAST platform, which I wasn't aware of. We could talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, contributing to the company's successful exit to Disney. So welcome, Ben.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. And I shared that table earlier. It's in the ebook of the different things that I went through. Kind of a bewildering process, to be honest, navigating. I love DVR. I do need all the different channels. Lots of carriage disputes going on. I actually ended up having to sacrifice Multiview, even though I love it. Partly that's sort of a story that I kind of knew they were going to come out with it next year, so I wasn't hesitating. But give me your big high-level take on all these dimensions, and you're really in the kind of leadership team level trying to navigate. Which one of these matter? How do we navigate these different things with consumers? Give us your high levels.
Right. Yeah. No, thanks, Brian, for the tee up. And, your experience is common among consumers, right? In this day and age, in the old days, it was like, oh, you go one place and it has everything you want, and, and they're all pretty much the same. And now, when you have fragmentation of content and different tech platforms, the differences abound. So, I'd say, the stuff that really resonates most for consumers and what really drives purchase decision is, content and price. And those are really the two key things. Things like Multiview, for sure, are important from a sports fan perspective, and will help drive engagement once customers are on the platform. But those types of features typically aren't really the driver of acquisition or, one user's acquisition decision, to go to one platform or another. But, certainly there's implications on brand.
And let me have you react really quickly, and then I'll throw it to Jim for another question. But let me hit you with the big picture. This idea that pay TV, or at least some virtual piece of it, could be hitting a bottom. I don't know if you saw that. Is that what we're at now? Is like hitting a bottom, and we actually are going to have an
Yeah,
arms race? Tell me, am I being too
I don't know.
optimistic?
I don't know that I'm quite optimistic enough to call a bottom on it. Typically 3Q is historically a relatively strong quarter for pay TV. Typically Q2 is historically weaker quarter. You see some deactivations ahead of the summer and certain seasons wrapping up with football coming back every year. Typically 3Q is a strong one. Having said that, absolutely, like net ads for the industry are better than net losses. And so, I think with some of the other stuff you mentioned about slowing losses, maybe, I'm not ready to call a bottom, but, maybe it's not the cliff that some people were expecting at this point. I personally anticipate, growth to be net negative, but slow, net negative over the next couple of years, absent, huge changes around go-to-market for, cable networks or, what the NFL does in their next cycle, et cetera.
Awesome, Jim. Let's tee him up. Take your pick, Jim. We want to ask him about L bars or Multiview. He was there during both, right?
Yeah, no, I think your comment on Multiview was interesting. I think the other one that came up was L bars. We're at the execution level, right? We can generate any ad format our customers ask for, and I'm curious what your take was on L bars. Is that successful? Is there a format you like better?
Yeah, for sure. So formats like L bars or lower thirds or these other instantiations that enable the consumer to continue to watch a live sports game, but also have a advertiser message that's inobtrusive. Those are typically win-wins as long as they're executed well. So for example, at Fubo, we had a lot of success in our with our exclusive EPL content that we had in Canada in running lower thirds. Typically those sales would be like tip of the spear and broader ad sales that L bar or lower third would pull through basically 30-second spots because the consumer's not changing the channel at that point, right? It's on screen with the action. So we saw a lot of success with those units. They're I think pretty powerful from a media buyer standpoint.
Awesome. I think we've lost Mike Chioditti accidentally here, so hopefully he'll come back. And I think he had a question. Oh, here he is. Yes, God. Thank you, Mike. Go ahead and tee up your question to Ben. I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask Ben.
Yeah, Ben, just being on the content acquisition side, I guess I'm just curious, as a challenger brand, when you're listening in those initial meetings for potential, media rights deal, what are those metrics, those keywords that you're listening for that might kind of pique your interest, raise your eyebrow, and really, pivot the interest from casual to, okay, I seriously want to consider this problem?
Yeah. No, great question, Mike. And we, in my Fubo days, we did have partnerships with PFL, and they were, definitely mutually beneficial. We're fans of the brand and what you guys are doing over there for sure. Definitely an up and coming brand in a growing space. So in terms of what content acquisition teams and especially on the pay services side, versus the fast side are looking for, it's really like demonstrable viewership, and to the extent there is demonstrable viewership on pay platforms as well. It's it's a lot easier to kind of make the leap when you can see like, hey, this network had this content before and it did X to Y for them, rather than like, I mean, we all want to buy the dream, too, and that's that can work in the right circumstance, but typically, you're looking at like, a dozen different opportunities and like, which ones are really going to move the needle. And to the extent you can tie that to, demonstrable viewership, demonstrable sub growth, on like a Peacock or whatever, that can definitely help.
Awesome, Ben. First of all, we're going to bring on now Mark Lee of LG Electronics. Mark, go ahead and join the session here. Welcome to the session.
Thanks for having me.
And I just want to kind of tee up another discussion here really quickly. Ben, in our prep, you mentioned something about the idea of instead of an L bar, a lower third. And so I wanted to throw that out to you and then let Mark follow up on the different formats and ideas that, for example, you're familiar with, Mark, at LG Ads. But first of all, Ben, repeat a little bit what we talked about there in terms of how to make this work.
Yeah, so lower third is an ad unit that Fubo had. I mean, it's not a unique Fubo ad unit, but it basically, it's a ribbon across the bottom of the screen as opposed to an L bar, which is, kind of like literally an L, right? So that format, Fubo used in particular in soccer because you have certain shots, right, where, it's basically green, at the bottom of the screen. And so it's not disruptive to the user. You're not actually doing a squeeze back and making the view, the screen smaller. It's an overlay. Again, it's not something you want to have running all the time, but at the right point, you have a game engineer, live game engineer, pop that on screen. That's kind of the nuance.
Well, I mean, I think so. You touch on there the timing issue, and Mark, I'll bring that up to you. When you execute these, you have to time them appropriately. What do you do at LG? And maybe Mike, you can speak to this as well. How are you guys timing the ad placement of a squeeze inside content?
Yeah, I think maybe before I go there, LG's had a lot of experience in terms of interactive L bars, multi-view, from a device hardware perspective, because being the main glass within the household, we've done things where even on linear broadcast, we've enabled, L bars or squeezebacks with our partners like Showtime or even with NBCU, where they wanted to augment the programming, and we used ACR to help with those timing areas. But I think there's been more advancements on the digital delivery, and as we move more towards OTT, we're supporting the gamut of trying to help with those timing, because latency is always an issue, potentially an issue when it comes to live sports. And I have the gamut of partners that are doing a lot of the server-side ad insertion stitching when it comes to even multi-view, to partners like, for example, Amazon, who bought Psy, which is help to decrease that latency delivery for their live sports content. And then we do have partners that are asking LG, can we get more of the hardware integration on the client side to even reduce that latency even further? So I think it depends on the type of genre of content, but when it comes to live sports and enabling those type of timing and latency issues, I think we run the whole gamut from server side to client side.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's a great point to bring up. And I think I want to get everyone's perspective here. And I'm going to start with Mike. This idea of betting, or now we have prediction markets, which I think operate somewhat similarly. You'll let me know. But that, to me, first of all, it's going to drive revenue growth. Just that's how, historically, like brand new categories, like that's how we get growth. But more importantly, I guess, is kind of how you see that moving forward. What's your take on this?
Well, it really excites me about prediction market. I mean, the revenue is great, but it's more about the fan engagement. I think we've seen this proliferation in betting where at first it was just pre-match, pre-event, and then as data became more real time, there was lots of different player props and in-game movement you can bet on. And now I think prediction markets has made so many other moments in the live event, even around the live event and shoulder programming, different moments for fans to engage, whether it's, we have a great fighter, Francis Ngannou. He didn't fight last year. Might he fight this year? Like, fans might want to speculate on that. We have an awesome female fighter, Dakota Sheva, and she wears different fight kits. What color might she wear? So all of a sudden, there's all these new engagement opportunities that ultimately might help us, frame our season or, pick matchups based on how we're seeing different markets trend. So it's just the beginning, early stages, but it's forcing the whole industry to think more creatively around all the different moments we might activate with fans.
So, and I do think that it's a great point. It's not just the betting, yes, no, it's all the discussion and trash talking. But Jim, it does lead to this important point when you talk about pulling off a multi-view on the kind of cloud encoding virtual production side of things, right? The video stitching engine, it has to do some activity and encode. That does take some latency. And then correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but like for you guys, the delivery from the origin could be, for example, some low latency like Psy or you let me know, but I don't think you're big into the necessarily the CDN delivery game. Your job is to get the feed and have that delivered by a low latency stream. Is that correct?
Yeah, so obviously, with live sports, latency from a technology perspective has been a huge issue, forever. It's the example that always comes up of, you hear your neighbor cheering about a goal you haven't seen, right? When you get into some of these advanced services like Multiview, yes, then the nature of adaptive bitrate video, yeah, that latency becomes an issue. I think there's a couple of answers to that. One is, there are technologies that are improving that. Mark mentioned Psy, which is an Amazon technology they acquired. There's low latency HLS, low latency dash, and media over quick, et cetera. So I think from a technology perspective, we'll get there. The other part of that answer is there are tricks you can play, right, as you deliver some of these services. So the latency on what we do in the video staging engine of creating this personalized video is very low. It's well under a second. It's really the downstream nature of the ABR video that we have to account for. And there are things you can do by putting, a little bit of functionality on the client. So the user experience of maybe navigating between multi-views and selecting one is local, but the video and the experience is delivered from the network. And then you can play games around, preparing content in advance and things like that. So the user can see a personalized experience, and we can jump around some of the issues with latency.
It's a great answer. I think it's the right answer. I mean, I will say just anecdotally, I mean, I used to work at a play out services company, Amagi, people know, but we used to pay attention to like when the feed comes in and when it goes out. And let me tell you, the first time we paid attention to it, it was, I don't know, 14, 15 seconds, and that wasn't good enough. And we had to lower it dramatically. So it's great to hear, and somewhat expected. I was thinking it would be, at least under 2, but sounds like even under 1 or close. That's super interesting. Ben, to you on this, what do you think the impact is going to be of betting markets on this idea of multi-view as a feature? I mean, it could really drive it.
Yeah, I mean, before I get to that, I think just generally speaking, betting markets and how that impacts the live viewing experience. So, whether it's betting or prediction markets or whatever, that's something that Fubo looked at and experimented in a bunch of ways. And ultimately, especially as a pay service, kind of the job number one is like having a great viewing experience for, most or all of your customers. And so all of these like interactive type elements, whether, it's, multi-view or interactive sports betting or commerce or whatever, need to be accretive to the typical fan's viewing experience, not dilutive to it. So, typically there are customers that will want to buy something or will want to bet. But, you need to be careful about pushing that in their face, and like 80% of the people or 90% that don't necessarily care about it, dilutes their viewing experience. One of the great things about multi-view is that typically it's either, user initiated, or if it's, created by the network or the distributor, there's like an alternate channel that is the multi-view. So it provides like that consumer choice and flexibility for those that want to go deeper, but doesn't negatively impact the average consumer that really doesn't want that experience.
Awesome. I want to take a second to introduce our final panelist. His name is Raymond Holton. He was senior director at the IAB Tech Lab, and he ran something called the Ad Format Hero Initiative. I think I got that right. And Ray was instrumental in identifying amongst, I think, 100 entries, which were the ad formats that were going to determine the future of TV. And I think one of the major things you found was overlays. There are probably fewer technical experts in the world that know about this. And so, first of all, welcome to the session here, Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So yeah, Ad Format Hero Initiative, we reached out, or IAB Tech Lab reached out to the industry to find out what ad formats beyond the traditional pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll were currently being deployed in the industry, and then looking at, talking with advertisers and brands to see which ones were they most interested in. So we had over 140 submissions from 80 different companies. We were able to consolidate that down to 7 or 8, true ad formats that were being used and, wanted and desired by the advertising side. One of
Awesome.
the big ones
Yeah.
being the squeezebacks, which L bars falls underneath, picture in picture falls underneath. But we actually found that there were two main types of squeezebacks. You had squeezebacks during content and squeezebacks during ads. And what this really allowed for is, squeezebacks during content are typically controlled and managed by the content provider. Whereas squeezebacks during ads, that's opened up to LG inventory or distributor and cabled inventory as well. So it really opened up the ad format inventory to all of the suppliers, not just the content providers.
Great. And I'm going to turn from there into Mark Lee from LG. I think you're super familiar with this dynamic. Who has the right to pull off the L bar? What are some of your discussions with content providers? How do you guys go about this? And also give us a little perspective from LG ads. How much heat, if you will, comes from these types of formats? How many times brands really want to pull off these types of in-content formats? Take that for fast.
Sure. So I think maybe before we talk about fast, I think traditionally in the past, it's been a challenge in terms of copyright issues or the rights of publicity of, different sports, athletes or different talent. And so it's always been a challenge to really counteract good interactivity in programming. And I think that's why traditionally, we left it to the content owner that knows the rights and how we can enable those experiences, do that on our platform. And then you talk about ads, we've all done it in the past in linear as well on the client side, trying to enable interactive ads. And I think that when the content is shifting in terms of distribution options through OTT and through FAST, I think it's opened up new opportunities where there's a direct connection with the content owner that they can enable these experiences. And some of the things that the IAB, what Ray was talking about, we're very supported. So our subsidiary LG Ads has started enabling these programmatic LBAR and ads and squeeze backs to elevate new advertising opportunities for our clients. But we're not also limited to there. We've actually engaged in a lot of client side activations of shopping, let's say for T-commerce. We have an application called Shoptime. We initially enabled it with television shopping networks like Curate with QVC HSN, just to elevate like digitally what they can purchase right on the TV instead of calling in a 1-800 number. And then if you go from there, we can actually take that L bar now, whether it's in fast or linear, we can give those options to the content owner as well within in programming. But the challenge still exists, but I think there's more ability to get closer to those rights issues and try to enable these experiences even further. Advertisers always own their ad slots, so we felt it's a safer way to integrate.
Mike, we talked in the prep call a little bit about the idea of who owns these rights and there being a little bit of a gray area. Talk through that a little bit as to that, how that goes with your linear partner. Like, hey, do you want to do these? And if so, you're going to pay for them versus, hey, if you don't, that's fine. We'll allow some other distributor to do that. How do you think through that at the PFL?
Okay, it's always a negotiation between rights holder, between broadcaster, connected TV, and it could vary based on the specific distribution partner. So that is one of the many levers for negotiation. Who controls the ad inventory? What's the rev share on monetization? What's the volume of advertising? What type of formats are allowed? Does one party control a certain format, another party? The more complex this ecosystem gets, the more it leaves room for negotiation.
But I think you also said you uniquely produce some of your own live events, in which case you control also the production side of it. Is that correct?
That is unique to PFL, where I was at the NBA for a long time, and at the NBA at the time, Turner and ESPN, the broadcast partners, were taking on the production, whereas at the PFL, we kind of control it end to end. So we distribute on ESPN, but we produce the broadcast in-house, which does allow us to be more flexible with how we could integrate different sponsors, whether it's an announcer read, whether it's a graphical overlay, whether it's an L-bar squeeze back, a traditional 15, 30-second ad. That's one of the benefits with controlling your own production. There's some negatives too, right? It's more costly, for example, but it does allow us to be much more nimble, much more flexible. And even if we sign a partner a day before an event, we can mobilize that quickly in a way that'd be much more complicated if we were reliant on a third party.
That's super awesome. Listen, we have gone way over my little scheduled time, but I do want to break at the moment. We have some Q&A. I'm going to ask these two questions. They have to be happen to be a little more technical, but folks, now's the time. Put your questions together. Put them in the Q&A. Ask the question of anyone on the panel. But Jim, Owens, I'm going to come to you first, and then maybe Ray and Mark can narrow in on this. First question, Jennifer Hipp, thank you for contributing a question. How does closed captioning integrate with Multiview? Can you get captioning on all streams? I'll shoot that to you, Jim.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll answer kind of audio along with that. So we can deliver along with the video feed, closed captioning and audio, and the approach we're using today to do that is, the client will, the user experience is that you'll see a bunch of tiles of video on your screen, and you want to be able to navigate between them. So the user experience today is the tile that's highlighted, you get the video and the audio, and with that you would get closed captioning. If you move to another tile, then you would get the audio and closed captioning for that tile. So Yep. It's definitely part of the experience. As we kind of discussed, there's two ways to do that. You can do all of that from the network and deliver the entire experience and have that feedback go all the way to our server that says, okay, switch to this tile. Or you can put some of that in the client and just deliver all 10 videos and all 10 audios to the client and let the client just select one. So either one works.
Mark, Lee, do you have a perspective on this? I know obviously at the device level you do things slightly differently.
Yeah, I mean, we're supporting in a similar manner, and I'm seeing similar things where they're highlighting a particular quadrant of the multi-view to enable the closed captioning. We have obligations as a manufacturer to even support some of the regulations when it comes to closed captioning, just in terms of enabling that. So that gets you one step further closer to the user to enabling those experiences in the video. And so we're providing that to our partners to enable that a little more closer to the client. Also, I'll mention, this past CES, some of our AI strategies to try to simplify the closed captioning creation, and we launched our closed captioning AI, where you can actually change to different languages using the AI system instead of being limited to certain languages that are provided by the partners. And we're hoping that can also bridge the gap with closed captioning. But overall, it's definitely an important feature for us, not only just because of the regulation, but the consumers do use the feature, and this is how we're enabling on the client side, but also helping support that with our app partners to enable that. Yeah.
Right. Anything to add on that point? And if not, go a little further on the different architectures you'd seen with respect to overlays, how they can be done, and what you think is the best path forward. What Ray thinks we need to do to help drive programmatic LBARs in fast ecosystems, as opposed to distributor ecosystems where it's relatively easier in the sense that somebody is a massive distributor with scale that wants to execute, they can do it. But what's your big tip for the industry having come out of that ad tech hero format? How can we provide more liquidity to these rails for fast and programmatic LBARs?
Well, I think, oh, sorry, is that for Ray? Sorry.
Ray, let's do Ray first and then go back to Mark.
Continuous standardization, as Mike said, because for these unique creatives, depending on whether it's a lower third or an L bar or a double box, they're having the advertisers having to create these ads in specific formats uniquely for each of these siloed solutions. That becomes very expensive on the advertiser side. So by standardizing the how the ads should be formatted, what's the frame rate, what's the size and things like that, that will lower the cost for ad creations for the advertiser and make it more universally deployed. And then we're also going to see before we start seeing things being more programmatic, at least in the tentpole events and the major sports live streams, because they are very specific on what ads can air during those key events. So it may not be something that the content providers or the leagues are willing to completely just open up to the programmatic market. So what you may see is more dynamic ad creatives where you'll have a template ad, and then dynamically on the fly in real time, part of that creative will be modified. So whether it's, a tourism ad for Florida, where it then gives you the real time weather of Key West, I think we'll first see dynamic creatives before it opens up the programmatic. And then we'll actually see programmatic open up, not so much on the tentpole events, but, these live sports and live streaming and, moving beyond the mid-roll 30-second ads. We're going to start seeing, things like Twitch, things like video podcasts, where you don't have a traditional ad break, but these non-linear squeezeback ads can be easily thrown in without interrupting the content. And I think that's where we're first going to start seeing the full scope of programmatic for these squeezebacks or multi-view type ads. And I think multi-view is going to come in, not just for showing different games on at the same time, but increasing the community aspect and the interactivity aspect for individual games, where you do a multiple experience, taking that, what is currently right now a second screen experience, and bringing that back to the main screen through multi-view.
Awesome answer. Before I go last to you, Mark, on this one, I just want to say another question. I put out another question here. Paul Faleo, thank you for asking this question. This one I'm teeing up to Jim Owens. It says, can these deployments for live sports and ad tech potentially apply on a one-to-one basis with esports as well? Ray, you just mentioned Twitch. Jim, I think the answer is yes, why not? But you take it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what would make esports different, other than if they're talking about just being able to have a one-to-one session with each user.
Exactly, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's traditionally how we actually deployed this. In one of the deployments, what we're actually delivering is a guide, and a guide by definition is a unique unicast one-to-one experience where what you're seeing on the screen is your interaction with the guide. So yeah, we can absolutely support that. Obviously, there's trade-offs in terms of efficiencies and optimizations, which you go from a one-to-one to a one-to-many in terms of the infrastructure cost. But yeah, it's still pretty efficient to do that, and you can absolutely create a unique experience per user generated right from the network.
Okay, well, I knew I'd be running out. I have a final question for you, Mark. I knew I'd run low on time. I want to thank all of you so much for attending this. I want to give you one last question, Mark. I'm going to tee this up. Pretty easily, we didn't talk at all about server-guided ad insertion. It's still on the server side, but the client has some ability to use what we might call HLS interstitials. Dash has a similar thing. Lightning round style question for you, Mark. What's the state of play on server-guided ad insertion?
From LG's perspective, we're supporting these in different manners. I don't want to reveal the partners, but a lot of the virtual MVPD partners have pioneered these ways of inserting ads, especially dynamic ad insertion into linear programming. So, like multiplayer switching, multi-period dash. There are a lot of these new technologies that are enabling these experiences. So, I would say yes. This is it definitely, as monetization goes there, as we need more customized, personalized, dynamic inserted ads. I think the server guided ad insertion would become more a key player for future monetization.
Fantastic. Guys, we've run out of time. I want to thank all of you, Jim Owens, Mark Lee, Ben Grad, Raymond, Holton, and also Mike Chioditti. What a great panel. Thank you guys so much. Handing it back to Steve.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. Thank you all so much. And it's obvious we just hit SGAI at the last moment that we could have done this for another hour.
I got a bingo card.
Yeah.
Had to hit it.
But yeah, this has been great, and we would keep going, but we have another session coming up. So before we go, I would
thank you all.
One little piece of business here. The winner of the gift card is Paul Filio, who correctly identified "What a Crying Shame" by the Mavericks and the late great Raul Malo. And Paul, look for an email in the next week or so explaining how to claim your prize. And we will be back at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 Pacific Time for Rethinking the Middle Mile for live streams at scale. So please join us back here for that. Thanks.